Welcome to this JCT screencast. The purpose of this screencast is to take an overarching look at assessment in Junior Cycle English. This screencast can be watched by individual teachers or subject departments to help deepen understanding of assessment in Junior Cycle English. It will be useful to have the English specification available during this screencast, which can be found on curriculumonline.ie. You may also like to nominate a facilitator to coordinate any tasks during the screencast. The purpose of assessment in Junior Cycle is to support student learning. We know that student learning can take many shapes and forms, and so it makes sense that the assessment of student learning should also take many shapes and forms. The framework for Junior Cycle tells us that throughout Junior Cycle there will be a range of assessment approaches to complement learning. The framework states that formative assessment, complemented by summative assessment, will be a key feature of the new Junior Cycle. This balanced approach to assessment is a vital part of teaching, learning and assessment. Assessment balance is achieved with a blend of formative and summative assessment. The ultimate aim of assessment is to support our students' learning, remembering that the goal of formative assessment is to monitor student learning and to provide ongoing feedback. And the goal of summative assessment is to evaluate student learning at the end of an instructional unit. Formative assessment, threaded throughout the Junior Cycle learning journey, will therefore be complemented by 4 summative assessment moments along this journey. The oral communication classroom-based assessment, or CBA for short, the collection of the students' texts, CBA, the assessment task, and the final assessment. We will look at the details of these summative moments later in this screencast. First, as it underpins all of our work in the English classroom, we will look at the role of formative assessment in Junior Cycle English. The NCCA has designed a series of supports for effective CPD for schools in developing their professional practice with regard to key elements of formative assessment. Copies of these booklets were sent to all schools. The booklets, along with slides and facilitators' guides, can be found in the Focus on Learning section of the Assessment Toolkit, available on curriculumonline.ie. There are 4 Focus on Learning resource booklets, slides and facilitators' guides, each dealing with different aspects of formative assessment. Learning Intentions and Success Criteria focuses on helping students take more responsibility for their learning. To do this, students need to know what they are going to learn, how they will recognise when they have succeeded, and why they should learn it in the first place. Effective questioning looks at how to establish a classroom culture that promotes effective questioning and examines the purpose of and strategies for effective questioning in the classroom. Research shows that feedback is one of the most powerful ways to help students improve learning. The Formative Feedback booklet looks at how to provide students with meaningful and effective feedback that can help them take the next steps with their learning. And finally, Students Reflecting on Their Learning explores how developing student reflection can allow students to take more responsibility for their own learning and progress. It presents lots of strategies that you can use or adapt when helping students to reflect on their learning. It may be useful for your department to engage with these booklets and consider, if your department is not already doing so, how to embed these formative assessment practices specifically in the English classroom. They are also designed to support effective CPD practice at whole school level too. As it is such an integral part of Junior Cycle reform, formative assessment is supported in all of our CPD workshops with teachers. It would not be possible for us to look at all the aspects of formative assessment in depth in this screencast. However, as they form part of an important starting point as part of our engagement with the new English subject specification, we will look at the use of learning intentions now for a moment. When thinking about learning intentions, the first thing we should consider is the relationship between learning intentions and the 39 learning outcomes in the English subject specification. In Junior Cycle English, the student's language learning is marked by a fully integrated experience of the 3 strands of oral language, reading and writing. The strands are further developed into 13 learning outcomes each. The learning outcomes can be found in the English subject specification on curriculumonline.ie. As always happens with any curriculum specification, Teachers will then translate these outcomes into rich learning experiences for students using student-friendly learning intentions. Our learning intentions will be based upon the learning outcomes that we have identified for a lesson or a series of lessons. Learning intentions will be communicated in student-friendly language and will focus on what will be learned during a lesson or a series of lessons. Sharing the learning intentions with the students is an important aspect of formative assessment. As AFSAM states, unless both teacher and student are clear about what is to be learned, why it is to be learned, and how it is to be learned, the teaching and learning will collapse. Let's have a look at an example of how this might work in practice. The unit of learning I'm teaching is a unit which I have called Bullying and Bystanders. If you are watching this screencast as a subject department, now might be a good time to pause and consider this unit, which is available as handout 1, accompanying this screencast. I have chosen a range of learning outcomes for this unit. These learning outcomes represent the 3 strands of oral language, reading, and writing. One of the learning outcomes I have chosen is Writing 3. Write for a variety of purposes, for example, to analyse, evaluate, imagine, explore, engage, amuse, narrate, inform. In this example, I am going to focus on the part of the learning outcome, writing to imagine and narrate, and I'm going to work with my students on creating a short story. One of the learning intentions that I might derive from this learning outcome, and that I think would be helpful to share with my students before we begin a series of lessons, would be we are learning how to create interesting, engaging characters in a story. This learning intention could be further supported by learning intentions drawn from other learning outcomes in the unit. Pause the screencast now and look at the other learning outcomes that I have identified in my plan. Choose one of the learning outcomes, preferably a reading or oral language outcome that would complement Writing 3. Working with your colleagues, try to generate a learning intention from the outcome. Now that you have created a learning intention, consider it in light of the 3 points on screen. Please pause the screencast to engage in this activity. Learning intentions act like a foundation for the other aspects of formative assessment, as it is from the learning intention that we can work with our students to co-construct success criteria. Also, if we and the students are clear on the learning, it can lead to more effective questioning, can be the basis for real and meaningful feedback, and can provide students with meaningful opportunities to reflect on the learning. For further supports on the other aspects of formative assessment, please go to the Assessment Toolkit, which is available on curriculumonline.ie. You can also visit jct.ie for further support in this area of assessment. Formative assessment, threaded throughout the junior cycle learning journey, will be complemented by 4 summative assessment moments along that journey. Let's take a brief look at these now. There will be 2 classroom-based assessments, 1 assessment task, and 1 final assessment. The classroom-based assessments, or CBAs for short, are school-based assessments. The first CBA is the Oral Communication CBA. It takes place at the end of 2nd year. It is based on specific learning outcomes. All the details of this CBA can be found in the assessment guidelines, which are published on curriculumonline.ie, where you can also find a selection of examples of the Oral Communication CBA. We have also developed a JCT screencast that focuses on all the essential details of this CBA. This can be found in the screencast section on the English page of the JCT website. An important note to consider is that while the Oral Communication CBA is in itself a summative assessment moment, formative assessment throughout 1st and 2nd year plays a key part in supporting the students' learning for the CBA. Even during the research and preparation stages for the Oral Communication CBA, formative assessment, clear learning intentions and success criteria for their chosen format, effective questioning, and the students' own abilities to reflect on their learning will play an important role in supporting our students, preparing for their CBA. Formative assessment, complemented by summative assessment, provides the best support for our students' learning. Here's one teacher explaining the importance of sharing the learning with the students at the outset of the CBA.
Command of language is important, isn't it? Like fluency of language, command of language, it goes back to all those descriptors. They're important. And I found myself that when my student had a purpose, that everything else started into place.
Once they knew what it was.
Once they knew exactly what they wanted to achieve by the end goal, like what was my goal, once they had that, then I suppose the format followed that, really. Okay. Once we decided on the topic, we had the purpose in line, what I wanted to do, the format came with it, I suppose, and then they had the end goal. That it allowed for itself, really.
If you would like to hear more teachers reflecting on how they supported their students' learning through the CBA process, the NCCA video, Oral Communication, Some Insights, may be useful to you. Please pause the screencast now if you wish to watch this video, and there is a link to this video located underneath this screencast on our site. The second CBA is the collection of the students' texts. Again, this is based on specific learning outcomes. Students start building their collection in second year and submit 2 pieces for assessment in December of third year. The writing for this collection will arise in the majority of cases from classwork. Again, all the details of this CBA can be found in the assessment guidelines, which are published on curriculumonline.ie. Once again, this summative moment of student learning will be supported through ongoing formative assessment in our practice, providing scaffolding, feedback, and moments of reflection for students as they journey through the writing process and develop their collection of texts. Both CBAs are offered at common level and will be assessed by the teacher using the features of quality. These features of quality can be found in the assessment guidelines on curriculumonline.ie. A 2-stage process will operate when applying the features of quality. Let's look at how to apply the features of quality to the oral communication. Teachers will make an initial judgment while watching and listening to a student carrying out the oral communication as to whether the student has yet to meet expectations. This will establish a basic threshold for what is considered to be in line with expectations in relation to the features of quality. If appropriate, the teacher will then proceed to move up through the descriptors until one is reached where the student's oral communication clearly does not match all or nearly all of the features of quality. The student's oral communication will therefore be assessed as being at the preceding descriptor where it is clear the student's work matches all or nearly all of the features of quality at that level. A similar process would apply for the collection of the student's texts CBA. Classroom-based assessments present students with opportunities to demonstrate their learning and understanding in a way that formal pen and paper examinations cannot, giving us further breadth in how we assess our students in junior cycle. They focus on the processes involved in learning and not just the end product. They allow students to reflect on their learning. Let's take a look now at our third summative moment across the junior cycle English learning journey, the assessment task. The assessment task is specified by the NCCA and related to the learning outcomes for the second CBA, the collection of the students' texts. It is a written task completed by students during class time. Students will reflect on skills developed during the collection of the students' texts. The assessment task consists of 2 stages. Firstly, engaging with and discussing a piece of stimulus material to prepare for the written task. And secondly, reflecting upon and writing about their experiences as creators of texts. The assessment task takes place just after the second CBA in December of third year. It will happen in the classroom but will be assessed by the SEC and will be worth 10% of the overall result from the SEC. It will be submitted to the State Examinations Commission for marking along with the final assessment for English. For further information, support and samples of the AT, please go to curriculumonline.ie and visit the Assessment Toolkit. The fourth and final summative moment is the final assessment. The final assessment will take place in June of third year. It will be one 2-hour paper. It will be offered at higher and ordinary level, and it will be based on the learning outcomes marked with this symbol in the subject specification. It will be assessed by the SEC. Sample papers are available on examinations.ie. It will be graded as follows. A distinction is equal to or greater than 90 to 100. A higher merit, greater than or equal to 75 and less than 90. A merit, greater than or equal to 55 and less than 75. Achieved, greater than or equal to 40 and less than 55. Partially achieved, greater than or equal to 20 and less than 40. Not graded, greater than or equal to 0 and less than 20. All components of Junior Cycle assessment will be reported in the Junior Cycle Profile of Achievement. The students' achievements in the state certified examinations, inclusive assessment tasks, will be reported on here. The students' achievements in the CBAs and other aspects of the students' learning will also be reported in the JCPA. Having considered the assessment picture at Junior Cycle, I hope that we have begun to show how formative assessment, complemented by summative assessment, will be a key feature of Junior Cycle assessment in English. I hope that your understanding of assessment in Junior Cycle English has deepened. If you have further questions, please email us at info@jct.ie, and you may also find other resources and information on our website jct.ie useful. For the curriculum specification and the assessment guidelines, as well as examples of students' work for the Oral Communication CBA, please visit curriculumonline.ie. Thank you for taking the time to view this JCT screencast.